All right, we'll get started. So, good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in this morning to our Krembil Friday coffee breaks. This morning, we are going to be talking about Instagram. And Instagram is another social media platform that we can use as scientists, as healthcare professionals to get our work out there, to communicate with the public, and to really show who we are in healthcare, what our roles are to people that may not have an idea. You know, we can do that with Twitter, we can do that with YouTube, we can do that with anything, even TikTok, which is all the craze right now. And I don't know if I'll do a coffee break on that because I myself have no idea how that app works. But in any case, let's get started. And I figure we get started with a bit of a history. So Instagram's actually fairly old. I wouldn't say old, but it's more than 10 years old. Initially, the app started for whiskey. The Stanford graduate Kevin Systrom built an app because he liked whiskey and wanted people to share their photos of whiskey and things like that. Eventually, what happened, they kind of pivoted with his co-founder to just photo sharing. And what they did was basically take all the good stuff about that whiskey app and make it into what we now know as Instagram. Eventually, it launched in October 2010 in the iOS App Store, and it had over 1 million users by the end of 2010 and the beginning of 2011. Fast forward to 2012, you have Facebook that buys Instagram for $1 billion. And since then, it's just been breaking records, hitting milestones, and it has become one of the most popular apps downloaded from the App Store behind YouTube, which is the most popular app. So in a matter of 10 years, we've seen basically this new way of sharing media, of communicating with people, and it took no time at all. So just a bit of statistics. Instagram is the sixth most popular application, as you can see on the graph here, behind some of these. And a close behind that is TikTok, which is fairly recent and has done very well and captured a large audience. Instagram does have over 1 billion users per month, and that is a lot of people, and that is a lot of content to filter through that you're gonna be seeing, and people are gonna be seeing throughout their day. About 37% of adults use Instagram, so there's a fair proportion of adults that use Instagram. There's also a good proportion of young people that use Instagram. So if we look at teen social media usage, a lot of them use Snapchat, which is another sort of photo-centric social media application. 24% of them do use Instagram, and you find less of them will use Facebook and Twitter, which seems to be reserved for people of my generation and older. But I highlight this because there's an opportunity to educate and inspire, because these teenagers are soon going to transition into higher education if they choose that path. They're going to want to find ways to communicate with their colleagues, other people within their scopes of interests, and that may be science, that may not be science, maybe healthcare, maybe something else. But the whole idea is that if we can be on this platform and continue to inspire and educate, then we can kind of capture that audience and get people excited about science as well. So this is sort of a mind map. And if you were here for our Krembil Coffee talk about graphics, this is what a mind map looks like. And so with social media, we want to keep in mind some of these motivations, right? The goal, encompasses some of these things. Not everything's listed here, but as scientists and healthcare professionals, we want to influence. We want to promote trust in science. We want to have people see the importance in science, and we want to create an appetite for more research. We want to foster curiosity. We also want to have outreach, right? We want people to talk about it. We want it to be accessible. We want to get citizens involved in science and scientific thinking. We also want to correct and inform, right? We don't want to spread misinformation. We want to get the facts right. And there's a reason it's changing, because we're learning new things every day, and we want to be able to share those new things and have people have those new facts and things easily accessible. And we also want to add value, because a lot of the times we're trying to fill a niche, or we're taking our research into a broader context. We don't want the research to just stay in the lab. We want to see how applicable it is to the general public, how it can make our lives better and the lives of others better as well. So these are sort of the purposes of social media, whether it be Twitter or even Instagram. So I'd like you guys to kind of keep that in the back of your mind when you're thinking about social media, what you're posting, how you're posting it, and how you're wording things in your messages and captions and things like that. So I've got a brief sort of list of tips to consider when it comes to Instagram. Now, these are not exhaustive by any means, but they'll sort of help you get started, get off the ground with Instagram, and sort of, help you shape what you want to post and things you may want to consider when you are starting out. So the first thing I would say is building a brand. And everyone talks about brand and what your brand is. And I always found that a bit hard when I first sort of got into Instagram and sort of social media. And some things to consider is sort of define your goals, right? What do you want your Instagram page to do? And an example would be maybe to educate somebody about a condition, or to bring awareness to a certain disorder. And within that, defining your goals, you can find your focus and theme. For us at Krembil, we have 3 pillars, and that's disorders of the brain, bone, and vision disorders, right? So a lot of our content is going to focus around those disorders, and whether it be new research or groundbreaking techniques, or scientists who have won awards, or trainees who have won awards within our institution, and they will all relate to those 3 disorders that we mainly focus our research on. And if you haven't already, definitely follow us on Instagram. It's at KrembilRI, and I'll have all our links towards the end of the presentation. The next thing to do when you are building a brand is to engage with your audience, right? So when people comment, when people message you on Instagram, reply. Take the time to reply, because when you build that connection, you're being authentic, and a lot of people will connect with that authenticity. Use hashtags. I'll actually have that as a tip later on, and how you can leverage hashtags to have your content seen, or connect with similar content that you're posting as well. Also, keep in mind, your personality is the brand. Who you are as a healthcare professional, if you choose to do a page sort of in that vein, or as a researcher, that's who you're going to be promoting. And I tend to say with a brand, people sometimes will stay for the person, right? Because they connect with the person, and they connect with their values and what they're presenting, right? So keep that in mind. Don't be afraid to showcase your personality within images and within your content as well, because people want that connection. And to sort of create a better connection, what you can do is tell a story. This applied to sort of the Twitter coffee break session we had as well. And telling a story with, a caption with limited characters is hard, but it can be done, because again, what you're doing is creating that emotional connection. Maybe you could talk about your research journey, or why you do what you do, or why you're in healthcare, or what led you in healthcare. For me, my story is pretty simple, and I think I've told this to a lot of people. I'm a scientist by training, and I kind of got into photography because I used it as a stress relief in university. Started working with groups at the University of Toronto to do some of their content. Knew that I still really love science, and I wanted to find a way to merge the two. And here I am communicating science and doing that kind of stuff, right? So stuff like that, telling your story, definitely makes your content authentic. People will connect to it. And in that vein, don't be afraid of longer captions, because people see longer captions as authentic. They're not necessarily they're not seeing the content as you selling a product or a lifestyle or whatever it may be. They see it as authentic. And when it comes to longer captions, that's how you tell your story. Also, be sure to leverage the awareness days, because the awareness days is a great opportunity to tell stories as well. And That's really big for us in healthcare, and that sort of applies to healthcare as well. And if that's what you're trying to do with your Instagram page. And also, even if you're an advocate outside of, you know, your science or healthcare background, you might be really passionate about, you know, breast cancer or prostate cancer or some other disorder or disease. Maybe incorporate that into your own personal page if that's the route that you're choosing to go to when you're maybe making your Instagram. As a scientist and a healthcare professional, avoid jargon. As soon as we start using jargon or terms that people can't understand, we lose that interest. We lose our audience. They get confused. They have more questions than answers. And it makes it difficult to keep the audience engaged with what you're posting and your content. Sort of the next tip, these are some examples of telling stories within your post. On the left here is Dr. Aileen Davis, who is retiring at the end of this month, I believe. And so in this caption, which was actually really well written by Heather, my colleague, tells the story of her research and who she is as a researcher, right? The second post here is Kaim and Kamre, who did Stitch for Corona. And we're basically telling their story of how, you know, they were not doing classes or in school, and they sort of pivoted their skill set to help the community, right? That's a great story. You know, within this pandemic, we're looking for those feel-good stories, and this is one of them. This photo on the far right here is Madison, who's part of Dr. Kapoor's lab, and she has a great story of how she got into research, right? And so we sort of explain that in the caption, and we complement that with a great photo, and people connect to that. So all these three posts are some examples of how you can tell a story within your caption to be authentic and to connect with your audience. So the next sort of tip I want to explain is tagging and hashtagging. The goal here is to ensure that whatever you tag and hashtag incorporates the brand vision, right? You're also able to create your own hashtag. And so for us at Krembil, one of our hashtags is relentless research, right? Because our tagline is relentless. So you'll often see that on some of our posts. The goal is to have it be targeted. You know, you want to post relevant hashtags. You can use science terms like SciComm if you're you know, at a conference or posting photos from a conference or a seminar, or you know, anything related to the research that you do. But then don't use a hashtag that's unrelated, like, you know, anything related to maybe like fashion or beauty or anything like that, because, you know, Instagram sees that and it sees it as a disconnect, and it might flag your post as spam. So be targeted about your hashtags and use ones that are specific to your brand, your page, and the post itself. People can follow hashtags. So for us on the Krembil Instagram page, we followed the UHN hashtag. Now, UHN is, you know, a 3-letter acronym, and it can stand for many different things to many different people, but we follow it because, you know, people in the Greater Toronto Area, Ontario, Canada, may be posting about their experiences at UHN, photos at UHN, and we want to capture that. We want to see what people are sharing, if they're having good experiences and if they're connecting with our brand. Also, be sure to tag relevant pages. There are a ton of science-based Instagram pages that you can tag, and when you tag them, they get a notification. They will see your post, and if they see your post and they also connect with it, they might share that post to their story. They may share that on their grid, or you might even get a message from them, and you can start a conversation about your research or whatever it is that you do, and you build that audience and you build that relationship with your audience. Tagging and hashtagging also allows you to connect to similar content. So when you follow a hashtag, say neuroscience or you know, cancer awareness, you'll see a bunch of posts in that hashtag that relate to all that, hopefully, you know, unless people are spamming the use of that hashtag with unrelated posts. But you can connect and find people with similar interests and similar content. And again, you can reach out to them. You can you know, talk about the research, and you sort of build relationships through social media using some of these techniques with tagging and hashtagging. The next thing is to incorporate videos. Videos are a great way to, it's sort of a great way to use a different type of content, because You know, it's visually different. It can be of interest to many different people. And the goal is to use it with captions, because a lot of people will watch videos on social media without any sound because they've forgotten their headphones like I do a lot, or they don't want to be, you know, obtrusive to people around them. And so the captions really help, because then they can basically follow along without being like, oh, it has no captions, and then click off the video and lose interest. So 60 seconds, which is on your grid. So that's basically your page on your Instagram. IGTV is about 10 minutes, and it's another feature which you can access from the homepage. And, you know, you can have fun with it, you know, vary up the type of content that you use with your videos. You can tell a fun story, you can do quick tutorials, you can even show how lab equipment's used. We get to play with some really cool toys if you're in scientific research that the world has no idea how it works. And if you can, in 60 seconds, explain how a next-gen sequencer works, I think that's pretty cool. I mean, of course, I'm a bit biased because I have a keen interest in science, but you might find that the general public will be like, oh, that's, you know, really cool. That's how that works. I didn't know, or that's how this technology is used for this purpose in this research field. You know, that can be really cool. You can also record your talks and your seminars, little snippets of it, such as, you know, key sound bites that either relate to your research findings, relate to good progress within your field, and you can post that on your grid, on your story, IGTV, whatever it may be. And those things will resonate with people, and it's easily accessible, easily digestible with videos as well. So the next sort of tip is visual consistency. I think this is the hardest one, and I sort of struggle with this, or I did struggle with this when I started my own Instagram page, my personal one, and being a photographer, I kind of had a separate one, and then I merged them into one just because I felt that, you know, being a photographer kind of defined who I am, and every day I kind of carry a camera around anyway. So you have to understand that most brands do have a color palette, and it's very calculated. In the Krembil coffee break session about creating graphics, I did have some brand guidelines that I'm happy to share with people who weren't able to make that coffee break. And we can talk about color palettes because it shows consistency, right? If you have a set of colors that kind of guide the brand and the brand's vision and what the brand is about, people will identify with that brand, right? So with Krembil, we have a set of colors. We have the two-tone blues and stuff like that. So if you look at our Instagram page and you look at our Twitter, some of the graphics that are on there, you'll notice that the colors are similar and the visual pattern is similar. You want to stick to it as best you can because when people land on your Instagram page, the first things they're going to see is your grid. Right. And when they see your grid and if it's all over the place visually and it doesn't have sort of a pattern or any consistency, people are sort of turned off by that, and you know they're less likely to follow and engage with you. And the key here with Instagram is to get engagement, because you're trying to build an audience to communicate your work, to showcase who you are and what you do in healthcare, to explain your research and make your research more accessible, right? You want that engagement, and if your grid's consistent, you're likely to have more engagement on your grid. And sort of these are some examples here. On the left is our Krembil page, and so we have a combination of photos, videos, graphics, and things like that, right? So when you land on our Krembil page, you'll see it's consistent with the colors that we use, the way we post our videos and things like that. On the right is, I believe, New Scientist. That's their Instagram page. And there are a ton of these science-based Instagram pages that you guys can follow. And you can see how their grid's very consistent, right? It's got a headline and a photo that relates to that headline. And likely what they've done is within the post is they've put a link to that article or that scientific paper that this post relates to. And you can do that in your bio. You can put links to your articles, your research papers, and things like that that the public can navigate to. And you can do that with multiple posts. And basically one website will take you to multiple links. So you can link many things. So all these posts, I would assume, have links for within their bio on Instagram. And that makes it easy for people to access and to read and get more information should they choose to. The last sort of tip I want to explain is Instagram stories. So Instagram stories are a great way to sort of show, kind of behind the scenes stuff that doesn't necessarily fit on your grid that you still want to share and show your personality. The nice thing is that you can tag people in your Instagram stories. So say maybe you're at Krembil and you're, working in the lab and there's, you want to show some cool imaging or a cool technique or whatever. You can tag Krembil in the Instagram story as you're working. And then what we can do is we repost that right on our stories, and then our network sees that, and then they see your research, and next thing you know, maybe they're connecting with you about your research, and you get talking about science and have some really great discussions. So you can also have various stickers for engagement, and I'll kind of show that later on. And you can get your audience involved because you can see who's responded to those stickers, who's responded to your stories. The also nice thing is that you can create highlights from your stories. Stories on Instagram tend to live for about 24 hours, but if you choose to highlight your stories, then you can have them live on your page forever, and they kind of live on the top of your page when people go to your profile, and they can click those highlights and see what that highlight's about. So you can maybe want to highlight a conference or a seminar that you did, or maybe an award ceremony for your research that you've done or anything like that. And so these are some of the examples here. You can kind of see the stickers that you can place on your Instagram story, and you can have fun with it. You can do a poll and people can answer, and you can share the results of those the poll when you kind of expand this story, and you can see who's voted and what they voted for. Or you can do a quiz, something fun like that. Maybe you're in science and you have an image of something really cool, and you want to have people guess what that is, and you can do a poll. And I'm sure you guys can tell who this handsome fellow is on the right-hand side, and I'll leave that for you guys to answer there. But I'll definitely say it's not Don Weaver. But yeah, so have fun with it. You can do all these countdowns. Say you're going to a conference and you want to do a countdown. You can excite your audience about that because they might be wanting to hear your research and any new developments. So play around with it, have fun, and this is another way to engage your audience using Instagram stories. I want to bring up a study. As scientists do, scientists will do research, and there was research done on Instagram, and the study was called Scientists Who Selfie. The study was done to basically try to foster public trust in scientists. Scientists, we come with this sort of baggage of being elitists, and we're not as warm, we're kind of cold-hearted, and the public thinks we're competent, which is good, but they don't think we're very friendly. So what this group did, which was a bunch of young scientists and trainees, they basically looked at Instagram posts where you'd only post science-related things versus showing your faces with science-related things. So the people that showed their faces with their work or whatever they were doing in the labs and their research were kind of perceived as more warm, more approachable, and people were more likely to engage with those people. The goal here is to kind of break stereotypes surrounding scientists. And that's what we want to do with social media. We want to break those stereotypes, and we want to educate people, capture younger audiences, and get people interested about the work that we do in science and healthcare. So keep that in mind when you're posting. Don't be afraid to show who you are if you're comfortable, and have your personality show through in your work and in the photos that you post of your work. And I kind of like this quote from an Instagram sort of SciComm influencer, or I hate to use the word influencer, but I guess I'll call it that. But I'll sort of leave this up here for you guys to read, because this is really what I want social media to capture when, and so I want scientists to kind of sort of embody this when we're sharing things on social media. So yeah, like I said, it's it's another platform where we can educate and empower people and get the word out there. I'll sort of go over a little bit about the Instagram algorithm. It's a bit tricky because the fact that Facebook has bought Instagram, meaning that everything is what we like to call pay to play, meaning that a lot of people will throw money at their posts to boost their posts, to make it more visible, to reach a larger audience. And that's completely fine. You know, a lot of brands on Instagram will do that because they're trying to sell a product and they're trying to promote their product and things like that. You don't have to do that at all. You know, when you get started, and you don't have to do that ever. But the algorithm sort of works on three principles, which is relationship, interest, and timelessness. So the relationship aspect of it is meaning that if you are interacting with accounts, DMing them, liking their photos and tagging each other in posts and stuff, you're more likely to see that account's content at the top of your feed versus someone that you don't interact with, right? So if you're interacting with your audience, you're likely to see a lot of their photos, a lot of their posts. And if they're interacting with you, they will see your photos and your posts, and your content gets seen more frequently. So exactly what it is people who engage with posts like yours are more likely to see your posts. Also, the algorithm sort of shows the more popular posts. So the popular posts will get pushed to the top, and every time someone opens Instagram, they'll see that popular post first. Though if you do spend a longer time scrolling, you're likely to see less popular posts as well. So the key here is to read into your analytics. And within the settings tab of Instagram, there is a few analytics that can be very helpful. These analytics will tell you how long your audience is on Instagram, what times of day your audience is on Instagram. And that can sort of help you understand when to post, when the ideal time is to post, to capture the most amount of engagement on your post. So these three things just keep in mind, and this stuff is organic and you don't have to pay to do anything to build relationships or get interest or anything like that. So just keep some of this in mind, and when you're looking at your analytics, it'll sort of help guide you in terms of when to post some of your content. So just a bit of a summary, the goal here, I think for Instagram is to engage a young audience. With Instagram, it is a bit of a different audience compared to Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn. So the goal, at least for us at Krembil, and my goal is to connect with a younger audience with Instagram and some of the things that we post. And like I said, some things to consider is, build a brand, define who you are, what you want to bring awareness to or share or educate people with. Tell a story. Like I said, emotional connection is the key to go. Don't forget to tag and hashtag and be targeted with that. Don't use too many. Use ones that are specific to your brand and the photo and what you're trying to communicate. Use videos. Videos can be in your Instagram story. They can be on your grid. They can be on IGTV. There's various forms of video on Instagram, and be sure to use captions. Captions, they can be a bit tricky because you have to edit them in, but there are platforms like if you upload to Facebook, they can auto-generate the captions, then you can download that video and post that on Instagram. And there are some other programs that will auto-generate captions for you. Visual consistency. Figure out what your look is of your page with either the visuals, the videos, and the photos, and stick to that look as best you can. Because when people first land on your page, that's the first 9 photos or first 9 posts is what they see, and they make a decision to either follow you or not based on those first 9 posts. And the last one is incorporate Instagram stories. Show some behind the scenes, post some fun, quirky things that relate to your brand, to your personality. And it's another way of also engaging with your audience and building that relationship. So the last, the second last thing here is these are some science-based Instagram pages that you guys can follow and get some ideas. If you're looking to start your own Instagram page, maybe you have a personal one, but you kind of want to separate the two between your personal page and your healthcare related page or your lab research page. So definitely follow Krembil because we post some pretty fun content and we're sharing stuff all the time from our researchers and all the fun stuff that we do here. The foundation also has an Instagram page as well, and some of our other institutes as well have Instagram pages. These are some other ones. The Weiss Institute, I think that's a really cool curated Instagram page, and the way they've laid out their grid is also really cool. Canadian Science, basically what's going on in Canada, right? New Scientist is the one that I showed when I talked about visual consistency. And that's more so just how they organize their grid and not necessarily like the content, but you can see how clean that their page looked and their grid looked. Follow some of the other hospitals, see what they're up to and the types of content that they're showcasing. A lot of the other hospitals post, their nurses, their social workers and things like that, and what they do, and with their staff, and they're always promoting their staff and things like that. And there's a ton of science influencers that you can follow. So Science Sam is a pretty big one. I think I went to school with her too. So she's pretty big on Instagram and looks to educate her audience about what she researches and science in general. The last one is sort of a bit of a challenge. I always like to leave these at the end of my coffee breaks to get you guys engaged. Maybe if you want, with some of the tips that I've given you here today, is you can start a lab Instagram page or a healthcare Instagram page. If you're a physician, starting an Instagram page, I think, is really, really beneficial to you because you can talk about your experiences in healthcare. You can talk about, some of the misconceptions and debunk that. If you're a researcher, right, you can educate people about a field that someone knows nothing about, right? And really bring attention to that science that needs attention brought to because you want to educate the public. In that vein, you want to identify your brand, right? You want to know what your goals are. You want to plan your content. What types of content do you want to use? Do you want to use videos, photos, that kind of stuff, and develop your visual style? And then get posting. See what content works, because you can go into your analytics and it'll show you the types of engagements you've had over the week, what your audience is engaging with, and things like that. So that is it for me. I hope these tips have been useful, and I hope you kind of put these tips to use and maybe start your own Instagram page and tag Krembil in it. We'd love to see what you're doing and what you're sharing and how you're educating us with the work that you do in healthcare or even outside of that. So thank you. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Twain. Very informative today. I've learned a lot, even though I'm an Instagram user already. Our chat feed has actually been really busy today.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to try and work through these in the order that they arrived in. So the first actually sort of focuses more on privacy and the concerns of putting Instagram on your phone, allowing another application to access your photos. I'm not sure if you're able to comment on that. I know that Twitter and Facebook and the other accounts also require access to your photos if you're posting something. Yeah,
that's a fair point. And with social media, there are privacy concerns, absolutely. I think with Instagram, it's kind of, it seems like an all or nothing thing. You kind of have to consent to share your photos because it'll ask for you to give access to your camera and some of your photos. I'm not too sure of the nitty gritty in terms of the terms and conditions, but I know Instagram's got the fine print on their website that people can access and read through. But like I said, with any social media, there is going to be a concern, and that's going to be up to you and your risk tolerance for that.
Absolutely. Thank you. We had a couple of comments about the photos and obviously the significance of posting the photo, how much it really means to your message on Instagram, that it really makes up the majority of your content. and really how essential they are to Instagram.
Mhm.
There was a comment asking, why use Instagram instead of Twitter?
Mhm.
With so many media platforms, it can be really time consuming.
For sure.
I guess maybe should you use both? Why should you choose one over the other? When we're really trying, especially on the science side, to continue doing our work rather than just engaging online.
Mhm. That's a fair point. You're right. There are so many social media platforms, and it can get very tricky to manage all of them if you choose to be on multiple. For Instagram, the goal, I think, at least for us, is to capture a younger audience. We want to capture as many people as possible with the research that we do. And with Instagram, it has a younger demographic. So we want to engage future scientists about the work that we do and get them engaged about the work that we do. So that's really the primary goal with Instagram, and it's a different way of sharing, what we do. With Instagram, it's so image based, versus Twitter, which is text based, and you can communicate, both ways, and they're completely great ways to communicate. But like I said, it's just a different way of doing it. And like you're right in saying that it's hard and it can take away from sometimes your work, but I find if you carve out a half hour to an hour, maybe before you wind down to go to bed, to kind of scroll through Instagram, engage on some stuff that excites you, content that's similar to your work. It can be very simple to sort of build that relationship with like-minded people and like-minded scientists, and maybe scientists from a different demographic too, that might be interested in your work and not know much about it. And some people might only be on Instagram, right? And some people might only be on Twitter. So having both, you capture more people to sort of see what you're doing and your work.
Great. Just for myself personally, I tend to find that Instagram, it's the nature of the environment, the positivity really seems to be there in Instagram, and individuals are wanting to share really good things.
Mhm.
And Twitter, often tends to be more newsworthy. Sometimes there's a little bit more of, that healthy debate.
Yeah.
And so also the style in which you communicate seems to be a little bit different.
Yeah.
So, for myself in engaging in these social media platforms, sometimes it depends on the headspace that I'm in and, sort of which route that I want to take.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to move along here. So there's been a couple of comments and questions relating to Instagram stories.
Mhm.
What's the use of them? When should you use them? What are they best used for? And, also how much time should you really be placing in them? Because, they are actually, time limited, as you
Yeah.
indicated, that they disappear generally within 24 hours.
Yeah. So that's a good point. So with Instagram stories, they are great as snapshots. It just kind of keeps your audience like, up to date with maybe what you're doing and things like that. It can be snippets of your day. Um, it it can, like I said, it doesn't live for very long, but it's just another piece of content to keep your audience engaged, and you will see that stories that of accounts that you interact with more frequently kind of show up towards the top or towards the front of the stories and highlights. It can be hard to sort of get your point across in a story, and that's sort of, you want to reserve that for posts, which will live on your grid. But like I said, it's just another tool to engage with your audience and to promote stuff that may not necessarily visually fit with your grid, but might do well on an Instagram story.
Excellent. I think it's another great opportunity, as you were talking about, being in front of the camera and showing a little
Mm-hmm.
bit more of yourself. A lot of individuals that I might follow often speak to the camera and sort of connect with their audience that way. And it might be more, about a particular event that's happening in that moment. And it doesn't
Mm-hmm.
necessarily need to live on the grid as well, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
So the next question is, are there times of the day to post that have better engagement?
That's a good question, and there is a ton of research. I'll actually, when I link the slides and sort of the video for this, I will put some resources for that. But what I've generally found that a lot of people tend to engage around lunchtime during their workday, at least in North America, is what some statistics have shown. So anywhere between like 11 a.m. to 2 p.m., a lot of people will do that because, you know, when people eat lunch at work, they're likely on their phones, either answering emails and stuff like that. So you're likely to capture that type of audience. Also pay attention to your statistics and sorry, your analytics. Your analytics will tell you when your audience is online, and you can sort of use that as a measure of when to post. So say, you know, the majority of your audience is on Fridays between the hours of, you know, 6 to 8 p.m. Maybe you want to try posting there for a couple of weeks and see what the response is. And you can keep track of all this in an Excel spreadsheet if you like. And then you can make a bit more calculated decisions about when to post some of your content.
I'm just going to go back to the last sort of question or area that we were talking about with the stories. So there are just some clarification that was asked. So the stories actually, they're like a little video recording.
Yep.
And they do disappear after 24 hours. However, if you were making a post, a photo with a comment on it or on your grid, those do actually stay on your account.
Yep.
And unless you were to actually go in and delete them, they would remain there.
Yep.
So the next area is actually focusing more on consent. And
Yes.
so I think that this really goes into, you know, on the public affairs side, when we're going in and setting up a shot
Yep.
versus, you know, if individuals are just casually posting on their own accounts. So there's some questions around, you know, consent. When do you need to get consent? When is it applicable or appropriate to post a photo, say, of, you know, a microscopy image? Because if it's obviously going into a publication, then there would be restrictions on that. Whereas if you have an extra photo that's not, you know, embargoed or to be published and sort of owned by a journal. So can you comment on consent and these photos?
Yeah, for sure. Definitely obtain consent. If there's patient-related data that's going to be identifiable, absolutely, you'd have to get the patient's consent. And that's when you sort of would touch base with public affairs so we could get their consent and things like that. So if there's other people in your photo, make sure you have their consent as well. I believe that you want signed consent. I don't know, Heather, if you want to comment on that, if they're
Sure, I answered in the chat, but it's actually email consent that's preferred if it's in lab. And that's just that can even be a quick email after the photo's taken, but before it's posted, just confirming that they're okay for you to post. And oftentimes you'll be surprised that you assume that it will be fine, and you will in fact find that there are, you know, some people that are just not comfortable with their photos being up online or posted.
Yeah, so that is, I know I probably should have had a slide on that alone on consent, but please absolutely obtain consent for anything that you post. And especially, okay, so if there's a photo from a journal and you've submitted that to the journal, I don't think you cannot post that until the journal has published that photo related to the study. Yeah, so I think that hopefully that answers all the consent questions.
Actually, sorry. So sorry, if you don't mind if I just jump in for one more thing. We once had a case, not with Krembil, but somewhere else within UHN, where a clinician posted a photo of a patient scan, but took away the patient identifying information. But this patient's case was so unique that they, in fact, and because of what was posted in the post, they knew that it was their story that was being referred to, even though a name was not used. So even that is not permitted. So anything related to a patient, whether it's their face that you're showing or their scans or their story in any way, especially if it's unique, has to have a signed patient consent form.
And I think that we really need to focus, you know, also not just on patients, but on our colleagues. You know, if you're in a work setting, you know, as Heather and Twain have both been alluding to, and, you know, well, actually speaking to directly, is, you know, don't assume that everyone's okay with you posting that. It really is a good idea just to check in and make sure that it's fine. And even in your own personal spaces, you know, definitely, I know that there's a lot around posting birthday parties or things about children, really, unless it's your family or individuals that you're directly connected to, it's really just a good idea just to make sure that everyone's okay. And even in your environment, going back into the lab, as Heather mentioned, with scans, or, if it's maybe in a work setting that you don't have ownership over, just use your best judgment. And if you're ever questioning something, check in with public affairs.
Yeah, and just on that note, Carly, sorry, I just saw that Star put another comment in the chat just about shooting a photograph in a lab area is what I think she meant on the topic of consent. Is it okay to post Krembil UHN space with no people? The question is, it should be, but you have to be super careful that there's nothing proprietary or nothing else in the shot. I would say before you post anything, send it to Twain or I, and let us just have a look as a second eye to make sure that there's nothing that we see that could be a red flag. So again, it should be fine, but it's good to have all these filters on when you're taking and posting anything of this nature.
Great. So another question we have here, Twain, is around the analytics. So are these only available for branded content users?
I don't believe so. I'm just going to pull up the Instagram or my personal Instagram page. I have access to that because actually so with the analytics, I think they are available if you are, I guess, quote unquote, a business. I'm not sure because both the accounts that I run, my own and the Krembils, work under, I guess, a business or corporation, which I guess, of course, if it's just a personal account, and it can be a bit harder to gauge your analytics. And then in that case, you kind of have to just look post by post and keep track of that stuff on your own, versus where with the business accounts, you can see when your users are most active or when your audience is most active. I'm just trying to think if, so that would be a bit of a challenging part but the thing is that what you can do is if you link to a Facebook page, then you can basically be a business, or I think there's ways to make yourself a business on Instagram, and it could just be like, a scientist or scientific research, and you can label it as that. And then you would still have access, even though you were an individual, you would still have access to some of the analytics.
Okay, I think this is our last question. And then we will move on to our coffee mug draw that we do each week. The last question for you, Twain, can you explain how to go live?
That's a great question. So I've never gone live on Instagram. I know people that do use the function. So going live, I'm not sure if that's also for Instagram businesses, but it's under the story. I'll kind of show it here if you guys can see are my slides still up? Hold on. Give me one sec. How do I stop? Oh, here we go. Stop sharing. Okay, so if you see on your Instagram stories, I don't know if you can see, it says go live. There's glare might be there, but it'll say go live there. And basically what that does is you can basically go live and people will see that you're live, and it's basically a snapshot of what you're doing at that moment. So a lot of people will do that at conferences, or it's kind of like live tweeting, but it's a live video. Or if people are doing almost like a podcast type session where they'll have another person to go live with them, and they will answer questions back and forth about a certain topic or whatever it may be. It's a bit, I think it's a fun way to engage your audience. And I think it tends to work with larger corporations and with people who have large followings, because they have the audience that are hungry for that type of information. So I guess as you build and as you get a lot of questions, maybe you can have sessions where you go live and say someone wants something explained, and you can go live and explain that, topic or whatever it may be. And it's a function built into the Instagram stories page. If you just swipe on the bottom, you can go live and people can join in and pay attention to that comment, and you can answer questions as they comment when you're live as well.
We've got a couple extra comments just in relation to that. Renata has indicated that you can invite someone to go live with you just mentioned, and you can use that for up to an hour, and so watch your live streaming. I think that you also might have the ability to sort of bank that video and people can come back to it afterwards.
I think it's available for 24 hours to watch, like if it's about an hour long on your story.
Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for such a wonderful session. I think we're ready for the mug draw. We actually do not have our special helper here today. Amy and her daughter Ellie are attending another session right now, so I'm going to do this on my own. You probably saw my daughter hop in the screen a little while ago, but I think she's run off with the dogs. So I have all of the names of our participants in my trusty hat here, and I'm going to draw for today. So we have Tracy. Congratulations, you have won yourself a Krembil branded mug. Please get in touch with Heather or our office and we can coordinate how to get that to you. So I'm going to send it back over to Twain and to Heather if you would like to have some closing remarks. Thank you.
Go for it, Twain.
Okay. All right. So I hope this helps you guys, and I hope you maybe start considering using Instagram and work it into your social media sort of portfolio, if you will. These are not an exhaustive list of tips and considerations. There are a ton of resources online. Instagram is huge in the marketing industry, as you probably know, as if you are users of the app already. But we want to sort of use this to, like I said, communicate our science, communicate our work, and use it to promote our science. So I hope that you guys enjoyed it. Thank you for attending. And I believe next week is how to craft an elevator pitch. So please stay tuned to that. We'll have some great tips. Thank you. And other than that, I hope everyone has a great weekend.
Bye, everyone. See you next week.